It is a great pleasure tonight to welcome two dear colleagues, members of the French School at Athens, the co-directors of the Kίρρα excavation, Julien Zurbach and Raphaël Orgeolet. Having personally the luck to participate in this project, I know firsthand what an amazing site Kίrra is, and the effort that Julien and Raphaël have put in order to design and execute really a state-of-the-art multidisciplinary field project, which brings together a diverse group of specialists working with the most advanced techniques for best recovery, documentation, and data analysis. You will see. Julien Zurbach graduated from École Normale Supérieure in Paris, where he's now assistant professor in Greek history. His doctoral thesis was about land distribution and exploitation from the Mycenaean to Archaic times, and his interests focus on rural history and ancient economy, Aegean scripts and Mycenaean pottery, and of course, Greek history. On all this, he has published extensively. Having diverse fieldwork experience from France, Portugal, and Italy, Julien had a central role in the organization and final publication of very important projects in the Aegean, namely Mallia, Miletus, and now Kίrρα. Raphaël Orgeolet is assistant professor in archaeology of the Mediterranean Bronze Age at Marseille Université. His PhD was on domestic architecture and use of space in Neolithic and early Bronze Age, Central Greece, and his main areas of interest are architecture and urbanism, society and state formation, as well as sealing practices. Raphaël has also worked extensively in Greece, being involved from his student years in excavation of both the French and the British archaeological schools, such as Koufounou, Mallia, and now Kίrρα. Well, I really believe that the broad background of Julien and Raphaël gave them the holistic vision that characterizes the Kίrra project. Their goal is to employ an integrative approach to stratigraphic, geological, biological, and cultural data in order to fully reconstruct the greater picture of the site and the lives of the people living there. So it's time to hear all about it. Please welcome Raphaël and Julien.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation first. And thank you very much for this introduction. I don't know what we can say after such an introduction, but we will try to be on the level you have put. We will be speaking about the new systematic excavation in Kίrra. This is an ongoing program, so it's many things are still to be done. On the side of the material studies, I mean on studies of different classes of material, there is a lot of work to be done yet. So we will not speak a lot about pottery or lithic assemblages or other kinds of material, but concentrate here on the excavation. Many of you know Kίrra, so it was a good idea to reduce the introductory part of this conference to concentrate on the geomorphology first, the excavation from a global point of view as a second point, and some aspects of the funerary context which are very important in Kίrra tonight. I will begin with a very small introduction to the site and to the project. You all know where Kίrra is, and I think that most of you have already some notions about this site. It was excavated, as you know, in 36 and 37 in 2 seasons by a French team, a team from the French school, led by Henri van der Fonterre. You have here a photograph of the village taken in the second half of the 30s. This is published in part. And a very important phase of the archaeological research in Kirrha began after the war, when the Greek Archaeological Service undertook a lot of rescue excavations in the village from the 50s onwards, which produced a mass of data and showed how important this site was from the early Bronze Age until the very end of the late Bronze Age. The new excavation we undertook from 2008 onwards is a collaboration, a synergasia between the French school and the Greek Archaeological Service at Delphi. It is on the invitation of Despinas Korda, who is co-director of the project and has worked a lot in Kirrha since the 80s, that the director of the French school at that time, Dominique Mullier, agreed to set up this project. And we have been able so to begin in 2007 with topographical work and to excavate 3 times in 2009, 11 and 14. And we are just preparing the next excavation for next summer. So we are working since 8 years there, and we have been able to excavate 3 times for various administrative reasons. And this shows that, I mean, you will see it in the conference itself, but this is clearly showing that a renewal of the permit and the continuation of work would be essential to a complete understanding of that site. So again, what we are doing here is presenting a work under progress. So what do we find at Kirrha? It's first of all known since the 19th century and most probably earlier for its classical Hellenistic and Roman site, that is for the sanctuary overlying the hill, the sanctuary situating on the hill overlying the classical port of Delphi, and for the historical sources connected with Kirrha as a port of Delphi and Kirrha earlier as the polis destructed in the 7th century. You have here a map from the 19th century before the installation of the modern village with the word Magula, you can see here, and a little rectangle which is probably the stoa of classical and Hellenistic times. The excavations by Van de Fonterre in the 30s have shown that the site is extensive, that there is a prehistoric site, first of all, so that this Magula is not only a Magula in the current sense, but a Magula in the technical sense. It's a prehistoric site with an important stratigraphy. And you have here a plan and a photograph from Van de Fonterre's publication of 1960. And a very important result was from the deep trenches led by Van de Fonterre, that from the summit of the Magula you have almost 7 meters of archaeological stratigraphy. So this means that this Magula is not only something like 200 meters on 300 as a surface, but also very thick, and it's a huge site indeed. I would like to insist, just to close the introduction, on two aspects of the work in Kirrha. The first one is that since the end of the 19th century, a modern village on the site, or more precisely on the southern slope of the site, this is urban archaeology we are doing. So this means that it's a densely occupied space. We are not moving freely. We cannot excavate where we want. There is a long history of expropriation for archaeological reasons, but all these constrains the work in some constrains the work. Well. So the first thing we did as part of this urban archaeology was geophysical prospection in 2008, which, as you can see, was not able to cover everything, of course, and had only a very reduced role in the location of the trenches of the future excavation. We had hoped that it would be of very much help, but in fact, more than an element of archaeological strategy, it was a part of a global approach to the site because we couldn't use it to locate the precise trenches where to define the place we wanted to excavate, but we have been able to use it to locate Van Efanter's plans, first of all, and to begin a global approach to the site because there are some results here which are important for the geographical and topographical approach to the site. The second aspect of work in Kirrha is on the regional level, because this region is, of course, what we have been used to call a periphery of the Mycenaean world, not only because it was at that time a periphery, but because it has been for a long time a periphery in archaeological and historical research on the Mycenaean times. You have here a map from the new Parity to illustrate this. The sites which are known in the region are, for the Middle and Late Bronze Age, are four. You have them on this map. So Delphi, Chrysa, Gla, Iteas, and Kirrha itself, indicated by the indicated on this map. So to conclude for the moment, when we began in 2008 and 2009, the goals of a new systematic excavation were more or less evident. We had to define a new pottery sequence and chronology, doing, if possible, C14. We had to use all the methods available for such a program. So settlement archaeology from inside with all kinds of data we would be able to gather from the site itself, and settlement archaeology in a more regional sense, that is all we would be able to gather on the built environment. We knew that we were probably to find some tombs, but we didn't know that it was to take so much time and to be so important. We wanted it to be, of course, to be on the scientific level of today, that is, to be multidisciplinary from the work on the site onwards. Yeah, And so I give the word to Raphaël on this point.
Along with the history of the tale and the use of space, as we shall see later, environmental issues are central to our work at Kirrha. They are partly tackled by, as Julien said, archaeobotanical, zoological studies and zoological studies, which are still in course. The study is going on, and for which we don't have firm results yet. But another important set of questions regarding the landscape and the immediate area around the tale had to be answered by other means. To our predecessors, and here I mean the French team from the 1930s, the setting of the site was, let's say, given. They thought they had revealed Delphi's harbor, and what they found reinforced the idea. Remains of the ancient harbor installation were and still are visible under the surface, just next to the Magula. And Kirrha was thought to be a coastal site, more or less the same as it is today. But when we started the new project, it was clear to us that we should reassess the relations between the site and the environment. And this reassessment had to be addressed on two sides. The plain of Ithea on the one hand, and the sea on the other hand, as the site lies between the plain and the sea. And Antoine Chabrol, who is here, is a young geomorphologist, member of the French School of Archaeology, undertook this work with electric resistivity, coring, oceanographic surveys, and other methods that he employed, and is now about to conclude, this year is about to conclude with a last field season next summer, and it is one of the most advanced cases that we can present at Kirrha, and we asked Antoine to present you his almost complete results. So I am letting the microphone.
Okay, thank you, Raphaël. So actually, these results are not complete at all, but we have some things to say. So concerning first the geomorphological approach and the environmental approach that we undertook since 2 years now, I need to say something concerning the global and geological context of the area, particularly because this is a very active area, a very seismic area, located in the northern part of the Gulf of Corinth. And so this is very important for us because it means that the tectonics has been very important during prehistorical and historical times and is still important now. And it has to be taken into account in order to understand the changes of the landscape since the prehistorical times in this area. So that's all for the background. Here is the general context, and the most important features in this area are the two rivers. On the western part of the plain is the Ileitos River, and on the eastern part the Pleistos River. And as Raphaël told us, the site is located just at the boundary between the alluvial plain of the Pleistos and Ileitos River, and the sea. So, in order to understand all the changes since the prehistorical time, I decided to make the study under three main topics. The first topics was something a little bit apart, but it was to reconstruct the paleoclimatology of this area. And it was to reconstruct the vegetation evolution, the temperatures, past humidity, and also paleofires. So we had to find a place to do this kind of study. The second part of the environmental program concerns the Holocene submerged paleogeographies that lie now under sometimes 70 meters of water. So we had to undertake an oceanographic mission in the whole Gulf of Ithea. And the last part concerns this time the plain itself and the site of Kirrha, and concerns the Holocene geomorphological dynamics of the rivers and of the alluvial deposits. Concerning the first approach, the paleoclimatic approach, we needed to find a place that had enough sediment records to make a pollen analysis. And this was not easy because we could not make a drill in the plain because the plain has changed a lot and the course of the rivers has also changed. So there is a risk of mixing of the sediments. So I didn't want to make a drill for the pollen analysis in the plain. So we need to find another place, and we found one just in front of Itea. In this part, just in front, we found the karstic depression that was filled with swamps, as you can see on this picture. This karstic depression was filled with swamps and is connected from the ground to the sea level, to the actual sea level. So it was a very good opportunity to make palynological studies in this place, which was not easy to access, but we did it, and we obtained a fantastic core here. And since 2 weeks, we do have the first results of the first radiocarbon datings, and it appears that thanks to this core in this dolin just in front of the site of Itea, we will have the opportunity to reconstruct almost 7,000 years of past climatic changes and past vegetation. So this is a great opportunity also to understand the regional climatology of all the area, not only for Kirrha. So this study is now in the laboratory, so we are still working on it right now. The second part concerns the submerged geomorphological features and the submerged features, and it was undertaken thanks to the collaboration of the Hellenic Center for Marine Research in Athens. We made a one-week mission in order to reconstruct the past geographies that now lie under the sea. And so to do that, we used several tools as a sonar mapping for the actual littoral, and we could see, let's say, geomorphological specific features, actual features, but also past features. We also made very precise 3D mapping on past features as past rivers, and here you have a picture of the 3D map of an ancient beach that lies now under 50 meters of water. So we took samples in order to date the beach, in order to reconstruct all these environments. And the last part of this oceanographic mission concerns the paleogeographies, and we wanted to know how the rivers, the Pleistocene River and the Elaetos River, what was their course since the last glaciation. So we are not in this kind of chronology, but we had the opportunity to understand everything in this area since at least 20,000 years. So we made also seismic submarine profiles, and we could see very deep incised valleys of the old Pleistos and the old Elaetos. So this is a very, very promising area that we presented also in several symposiums. So this was the second part of the environmental project, and the last part concerns the plain itself. As I told you, the plain changed a lot since the prehistorical times, and in order to see how these two rivers, that are now very small rivers, changed during the Holocene times, we made many profiles of electric resistivity, so we made kilometers of profiles, and as you can see, this is one of I just give you one profile, and it's a very long profile. It's almost 1 kilometer, and the depth is 40 meters. And all the red parts that you can see, the red bubbles, correspond to paleochannels of one of these two rivers, Elaetos or Pleistos. So we can assume now that during the Holocene, the rivers changed their course a lot, and maybe also destroyed a part of the site of Kirrha in the recent times. The second part concerns the drills that we made in the plain in order to understand how this area evolved since the occupation of Kirrha and maybe before. And it appeared that we found many interesting results showing that Itea, the place of Itea, is the youngest part of the plain. And this is a deltaic area, and this part in Kirrha has been can be considered not as a deltaic area, but as a past lagoonal area. So we made drills with this kind of driller, this one, and we could find in the plain marine sediments. So we can reconstruct the evolution of the plain. Concerning the tell and the site of Kīrra itself, we made a campaign also of drillings around the site, and we found something very interesting because we found just near to the site an ancient salt marsh that is now unoccupied because of the salt that you can see on the ground, the actual salt. But with the drills, we found at the exact depths of the lowest remains that we know from the bibliography, we found the contact between these brown sediments here and these gray-blue sediments. That is the contact between alluvial, let's say terrestrial, fluvial sedimentation and marine sedimentation. So we have a very good indication now concerning the past landscapes of the Bronze Age settlement that we still need to date. So we are waiting for the dates. But concerning the main evolution of the plain, we do now know how it works. This is a current work, so it will be precise by the dates. But at the beginning of the Holocene, this is the plain, how it looks. So this is the actual in red dots. Here you can see the actual shoreline. Okay. And at the beginning of the Holocene, the transgression, the marine transgression, arrived almost in the middle of the plain. So it's a lot. It represents 1 or 2 kilometers. So the paleogeography was completely different. And this was like that until 6,000 BP, around 6,000 BP. But later on, when the sea level rise started to stop, the landscape changed. And then the rivers deposited a lot of sediments that started the deltaic progradation, particularly in the area of Itea, and less in the area of the actual Kīrra. Then the evolution continued, and we obtained here something that we saw in the course, a sand bank, a sand barrier that was created by the current of the sea, and that progressively closed this eastern part of the plain. So we have the deltaic area and the sand barrier here that closed this eastern part. And after that, all this part was considered as a lagoon or marsh. Let's say this was a very, let's say, salty water, full of water, but not deep water. I mean, it was a marsh, a lagoonal marsh, and the site of Kīrra, the first people of Kīrra installed themselves into this marsh, maybe a little bit not far from the sandbank, but they installed themselves in this area. And later on, all this part was filled by the sedimentation, and this is the actual location of the two rivers. So now we need to answer to the question, why did they come in this area, and what was the point of interest in a so marshy area, and also to understand what is the role of the Pleiistos River in the installation. Is there a role, or maybe it was due to the sea, to the rivers? We still don't know for the moment, but this is, as I told you, this is a current study, and these are the very first results.
Well, it would surely be very interesting to have it would be very interesting to have the first period of the site, as Antoine has shown, because it is in some way the critical point to know why they came here and why they built a settlement here. Excuse me. But archaeologically, and for the moment it's impossible. We hope to be able to find the first phases sometime, but as I told you, the stratigraphy is so important for the moment that we cannot do that from the beginning. Our first goal when we came to Kīrra was, in fact, to find the settlement of the beginning of the late Bronze Age, because settlements of that period are quite very little known. We know very little of them, especially in that region. And Despinas Corda had excavated a part of a lot of structures dated to late Helladic II and a little bit earlier, among which are a kiln she published in Meso-Helladica. So we had in mind to have the settlement of the transitional period and of the beginning of the late Bronze Age. Of course, we didn't find it. We found some a lot of things, of course, but we are now we have documented almost every period from the middle of the Middle Helladic period to the end of the Mycenaean period, or to the Mycenaean period, let's say. But this settlement of the early Late Bronze Age remains elusive to us. So I told you that we wanted to have some kind of global approach to the site. And a part of that global approach is a functional approach to the different parts of the settlement, because it's clear from the beginning that such a site with such a stratigraphy, such a long history, and with such a size, must have a very complicated history. It's not that it's quite impossible that you have every period of occupation represented in every part of the site, and everything laying horizontally just on the top of the preceding period. And the form of the magula, which is quite irregular, is probably linked to the fact that settlements areas, inhabited areas, and other areas like necropolises and kiln areas, for example, have moved over time. So I will give you now some elements on the stratigraphy, on the excavation in general. We were able to excavate in two parts of the site, which you see here. The older French excavation was right in the middle, so the classical sanctuary was somewhere here, and the excavation by Van de Fonterre was for the main part here. We were able to excavate in what we call the eastern sector, so where the main feature is all the cemetery of the village, and in what we call the western sector, so practically on the eastern and the western slopes of the Magula. In the east, this is a sector where Despina Scorda excavated the kiln dated to late Helladic II, and this is where we hope to find something of this period, something more of this period. In fact, we found, we have now documented three main phases, one of Middle Helladic date, one of the beginning of the Late Bronze Age, and one which is clearly Mycenaean, mostly from last year, in two different sectors. So the kiln excavated by Despina is under this structure here, and we opened here in 2009 and 11, and here in 2014, last year. The first phase we encountered is late Helladic III, clearly late Helladic III. A or B, it's not yet clear. It's clearly a settlement area, and this pit, which is bigger in reality than it appears on that plan. The pit was excavated in 2009. It contained a lot of plain wares and a little bit of decorated wares, clearly late Helladic A or B. This is most probably a feature of peripheral zone, let's say, in the Mycenaean settlement. Because we know from other excavations, and particularly from Despina's excavation, that the settlement was reduced in that time, that the main period of settlement in Kīrra was Middle Helladic, and that in Mycenaean times it was concentrated on what is now the summit of the tell. So we opened here last year, yes, here, because we knew that Despina had excavated in the north of the cemetery and found extensive late Helladic III remains, and that the late Helladic III remains from Van Fonterre's excavation were lying just over there. So this is the summit of the hill, and this is also the Mycenaean settlement. So we are on the limits. Probably we have some houses here, and our pit here would be outside the settlement. So the limit would be somewhere at the older cemetery. These are some some images on Sector 4. So the Mycenaean settlement we found last year. Excuse me. It's not yet excavated until the end. We hope to do that this year. We already have some interesting material, interesting structures, of course. Interesting material because there are some characteristic shards to date the structures you see here, which contain clearly some beginning of a building. And there is a lot of, it's not quite clear on this photograph, but there is a lot of handmade kitchen pottery, which is very important because it's a local characteristic at that time. So the Mycenaean period is quite well documented. Beneath the remains from that period, we have found a lot of structures which are, for some of them, very difficult to interpret in a global way, at least, which belong clearly to late Helladic I and II. These are, first of all, from 2009, two little kilns. You have one of them here, which are very probably pottery kilns. So in the southern part, and they are probably contemporary with the bigger kiln, so late Helladic II. They are obliterating earlier architectural structures, as you may see here quite clearly, the kiln here, which date as well to the beginning of the Late Bronze Age. So we have at least two different phases in late Helladic I and II taken for now as a whole. In this area, we had a succession of surfaces built with little stones, which are very probably open areas linked to the existence of the kilns and lying over remains of architecture, which are for the moment difficult to interpret. In last year, we were able to identify as well in this part, so the kilns are here, in this part, different levels of frequentation dating to late Helladic I, three levels in fact, with many pits and with a big post hole in the middle. There is such a post hole of a considerable size as well in the south near the kilns. So this seems to be a characteristic of that period. But the structural remains are very few. Probably they must have been destructed after in succeeding periods, but it's clear that we have found here clear levels belonging to late Helladic I. This is another view with some shards of late Helladic I date, and the last element is that one, which is a space which comprised some children's graves excavated in 2011. So this area looks like inhabited or having been covered with some structures in late Helladic I, and then turned probably into an artisanal zone in late Helladic II. And underneath, there are the remains of a bigger structure of Middle Helladic date, where so you have some photographs here, and in this building we found in 2011 the remains of a very big pithos of quite impressive size, together with one vase clearly dating to Middle Helladic II, if I'm not wrong. These pithos had been repaired as well, as you see on that photograph, and this is so clearly a part of settlement, of an extensive settlement of Middle Helladic II date, which is the biggest period of Kīrra, and it's confirmed here, because you have here a settlement in a zone which in late Helladic I is probably inhabited, but in a way that we are unable to precise for now, and then turns into a marginal zone, artisanal zone in late Helladic II, and then almost abandoned in late Helladic III A-B. So this was for the east. In the west, in the other sector where we have been excavating, excuse me. Yeah. In the West, we were expecting to find a Middle Helladic or later Middle Helladic settlement, let's say, and we found indeed an extensive necropolis of the beginning of the Late Bronze Age and settlement levels of Middle Helladic date. So this is a view of how almost general view dating from the end of last year's season with a little plan. These are sectors 2, 3 for all this, and sector 5 here. At the end of 2011, 4 phases were defined and called ABCD, and the last phase, phase D, which is a settlement phase of Middle Helladic date, was subdivided in 2014. So the last phase, phase A, is the necropolis, and I leave that to Raphaël, to whom I will give the word in 2 minutes. And there are beneath this necropolis, and this is a very interesting result, that the tombs were really built in the ruins of an earlier settlement. excuse me. The preceding phases, so B and C, are not so well preserved and very difficult to date. It is clear that the necropolis dates to late Helladic I, but we can tell that with the help of 3 vases for now, because normally you don't have nothing or nothing like pottery. We don't find nothing in the tombs with the dates. So the probable date for the necropolis is late Helladic I. The settlement phases, the last settlement phases, B and C, are probably of Middle Helladic III dates, but we have very little material associated with that. You have here a view of the remains of phase B, and phase C is only a group of pits which has been identified in 2011 between 2 settlement phases. So the most interesting for us is that phase, phase D, subdivided last year in D1, D2, D3, dating quite clearly to Middle Helladic II, and where we have what we wanted from the beginning, so quite well-preserved series of destruction levels. So in the north first, and this is the photograph on the top, we encountered in 2011 part of well-preserved building, and in the south, and this is the photograph in the second photograph, we were able, as early as 2009 and then 11 and 14, to excavate this series of destruction levels. This is the most important building of this Middle Helladic II phase. We are not yet able to completely understand the plan of these buildings, but there is clearly a succession of frequentation levels dating to Middle Helladic II, and particular very interesting structures excavated in 2014, which is probably a group of domestic fireplaces with some structures around it built with mud brick. And this is, to close that part, the Sector 5, which has been opened in 2014, just to extend the excavation on that part of the site, and which has which has revealed the same succession of necropolis and settlement levels. So the aims now are to continue excavating the settlement phases we have, because we were looking at the beginning for the settlement of the beginning of the Late Bronze Age, but now we are able to document quite good settlement levels of Middle Helladic II, of Late Helladic I, II, probably in the east, if we look a little bit better, and Mycenaean, part of the Mycenaean settlement. So we have, in fact, all important phases from the history of Kirrha. What is still lacking are the earliest phases, of course, and we will try to do that in the next years. So I now give the word to Raphaël for some precision on the necropolis.
as Julien said, one of the major goals of the new project at Kīrra was the reassessment of the spatial occupation on the tell. The theme can be approached in a variety of ways and scales, but depends largely on the quality of the data. And at this time, our archaeological investigations are restricted within the limits of the two plots, as Julien said. And yet, Corinne and Antoine can provide us useful information for other areas. At large scale, that is to say tell scale, we aim to reconstruct the history of the site with the help of the data given by the rescue excavation, plus, of course, our own data. At medium scale, this is the plot scale, we wish to investigate settlement planning and mortuary practices. And the small scale, eventually, of course, is the one of the house and the tomb. At the moment, insights into housing and settlement planning are fragmentary, as Julien said. In the western area, we have just two portions of Middle Helladic II houses and very fragmentary architectural remains of Middle Helladic III. And you know what happens to the east. So we have one of the most elaborate cases that we have now at Kīrra is the funerary case. Funerary case that was, of course, not empty and blank when we started the new project. Van Evanter and his team had revealed almost 60 graves in the 1930s. And funerary contexts are countless in the rescue excavation of the Archaeological Service. So when we started the new project, we knew that we would have to deal with a lot of human remains, and we set up a team in the very beginning of the project with anthropologists and anthropo-archaeologists, Analaya and Johanna Mutafi, who is here. But very soon we realized that the funerary case would be much bigger than what we expected. In fact, human remains rapidly proved to be largely widespread all over the two plots, especially in Sector West, so Sector PA, on the western edge of the site. In the eastern sector, just as Julien said very quickly, the eastern sector yielded 5 perinatal burials, all of them located inside or close to the Middle Helladic II house. It is difficult, it's what you see on the right side of the slide. It is difficult to say at the moment whether they were set up while the house was still in use, in activity, or if they were set up immediately after the abandonment of the house. The western sector, on the left side of the slide, was much richer in burials and human remains. As Julien said, the last occupational phase, is the late Helladic I cemetery. Up to now, at the moment, we have 27 burials belonging to this phase. 27 burials having been excavated and representing, of course, a much larger minimal number of individuals. To these, we must add 2 child burials belonging to the Middle Helladic II settlement below the LH1 cemetery. The human assemblage at Kīrra is characterized by 3 main traits. First, the exceptional state of preservation, especially for the immatures. And I'm sure that Johanna would confirm this. Second, an extensive range of modes of burial and types of graves. We have simple pits, we have clay-lined, plaster-lined pits, we have intentionally burnt plaster on some of these pits, and we have mud brick cysts and stone cysts. Third, extremely diverse and complex mortuary practices involving significantly complex secondary handling. This is one of the most outstanding traits of the human assemblage at Kirrha. And maybe we could speak of a fourth one, the great paucity of grave offerings. We have, as Julien said, only 5 vases and a few beds and 1 bronze pin for almost 30 burials. This paucity of the grave goods contrasts with the rich mortuary practices, especially secondary handlings. So, attendance to the West early late Helladic cemetery at Kirrha was by no means a quick and meaningless action, and the complexity of the secondary handlings proved this. Several graves are set on the top of others, and many secondary depositions in previously occupied graves attest to different temporalities. And we have here one example of a very important late burial in this necropolis, with a quite late grave offering, the small vase that you see here, with a great number of individuals. And we realized last season, in confronting the two planes, that this burial was set up just right over a previously set pit excavated last summer. A detailed analysis of mortuary handlings at Kirrha by Analaya, Ioana Mutafi, and ourselves is in press in the Staging Death volume, and I will only quickly focus on a few cases taken in the group of the cyst graves. We start with Locus 150, which lies at the western edge of the plot. As you can see, it's a quite large cyst grave that we excavated in 2011. On top of which we revealed a young male adult, which is obviously in a primary burial. Underneath this last burial, we have the remains, as you can see, of a very disturbed late adolescent female, whose bones had been obviously thoroughly intentionally disturbed. But the skeletal inventory is almost complete, and we think that this individual has been buried in this place and has decomposed in this place. It's after decomposition that all the bones have probably been disturbed. The question is why, and the answer came from what was underneath. As a matter of fact, the underneath structure, the underneath feature was this small shaft set up in the western part of the grave, delineated by 4 large stones, and in which the long bones of a strong, robust young adult male were set with the cranium. And it seems that the temporality of the burials here can be reconstructed. With the first interment was the young female, which has been disturbed to set the remains of this robust young adult male, and then lastly these young men. This is an interesting feature that we can see on the western side of the grave. It seems that this notch that you can see in the western slab has been intentionally shaped, and that this stone was placed just in front of the notch, so as to be able to put a lever to remove easily the covering of the grave that has disappeared. But last year we excavated another cyst just close to this one, which had its stone cover, so that we know that those cysts were covered by large stone slabs. This very unusual feature, and if you know of a comparandum, I would be very keen on knowing of it. Tells us about the intentionality of reopenings in Kirra's cysts, and tells us about the importance for the inhabitants to come over again in the cemetery to act the funerary rituals over a long period of time. Here is another case, maybe even more striking case of grave reopening and cleaning for the installation of a secondary burial. This, as you can see, this cyst is at the other side of the trench. The upper layer of this grave was filled with the commingled remains of at least 2 adults of different sex and age of maturity. And these remains had been put aside the cyst, so as to be able to arrange the setting that we see, that you can see here at the level below, just on the floor of the grave. You can see the commingled remains of the remains of a secondary burial of a young adult woman, featuring a unique bone arrangement that has maybe a parallel in Thessaly, but we're not sure. This secondary deposition occupied the right center of the grave. The upper part of the assemblage, in its eastern part, revealed the reversed right pelvis with the sacrum, the rib, and vertebral along the long bone fragments, as you can see, and the cranium was placed on the middle of this setting, and this is quite a unique assemblage. Again, an exceptional setting, excavated last summer. This small cyst contained 2 children, 2 infants. For the first analysis gives us a date of 18 months at the age of death. One was found in situ. This is the one you can see on this photography. That, of course, we reached this one later than the first feature that you can see here in the corner, in the southeast corner of the cyst. You can see the remains of a cranium and some of the bones of the second child had been put inside the cranium. This case is under study, and we can't say much more about it. But what is clear is that from this example, from the examples of the 2 large cysts I showed you, but from many other examples, it is clear that the combination of anthropological and archaeological methods have brought to light at Kirrha, that's the term, primary and secondary burials are not specific enough to describe a much more complex reality, and this complexity is in contrast with the paucity of the grave goods. And I think that when we think that the complexity lays in the handlings and the mortuary practices when we consider the funerary case at Kīrra. All of this hopefully is to be continued next summer, and we hope to be able to start a new 5-year project in the next year. To finish, I would like to say to the French school and to the Euphoria Archaeotiton Phokidos joined in the Synergasia, whose directors, Nancy Psalti, Alexandre Farnou, and staffs who give much time and energy to the project. We'd like to say to our main financial sponsors, the French School, the INSTAP, of course, and the French Ministry of Foreign Office. We'd like to say to our academic institutions, faculties and laboratories, to the students, of course, to the field supervisors, the team members, some of them are here, Joanna, Poppy, but also Evie, Margariti, and Ailaya. And last but not least, we'd like to say to our friends of IGU Society and everyone attending here tonight, a big thank you.
Okay, so questions. I'm not familiar with cyst tombs. I'm just, I saw that the dimensions are very small. And I wonder about this, the tomb you showed where the third burial was a man that looked like he'd been pressed into it. Is there evidence for whether the body was, maybe from other sites or from here, how the body was treated to, if you just pushed him down or if you cut up something or bound the body or something like that? Maybe that's a question for you. Yes, okay.
Okay, Monica. In the past, they have said when they were looking at these hyperflexed, highly contracted burials, especially the legs were highly contracted, people have suggested that maybe the tendons were cut. Actually, there is also one study of a physical anthropologist saying that he has evidence that the tendons were actually cut in some cases. I doubt it very much. However, it could have been the case, but the reasoning behind this, we don't have, from this specific study, we don't have good enough photographs or anything to really give us the evidence that we have cut marks on the bones or anything like that. The main reasoning was that since the body is dead, then in order to make it possible, since you have rigor mortis, when rigor mortis sets in, you need to cut the tendons in order to be able to assess this level of flexure. However, this is not true. Rigor mortis sets in soon after death, but after 48 hours or so, so if you really need to put it in a small tube, there's an easy thing you can do. You can wait for 2 days, and then you can flex it again as much as you want. So.
Thank you. I had also a question about dead people. Did you see any sign or traces left by illness on the bone because they were living on a laguna or like this? And I think of illness on it.
Again, with my colleague Anna Laya, we are studying the material right now, and especially the preliminary analysis was focused on other things, mostly about the basic demography and the burial practices, second thing that Raphaël was talking about. So pathology in details is our next step. So at the moment, we don't have yet results. We do have pathological traces. From the first view, nothing too extreme, really indicating that something is going really badly for them because of this specific environment. But we have to wait for the final analysis to tell you more on this.
I would like first to thank the speakers and very good English from French men.
Don't laugh.
We are not so much used, and it was excellent. In my opinion, it was really, I would like to congratulate you. It was really fascinating, and I was very much enjoyed. And very well, very clear. I mean, you have clear ideas. This is why you give these results, I think. And you have a strategy, and it was very well done. And thank you. And I would like to ask 3 small questions. I saw in a photo, you said that the settlement starts at the Middle Atlantic 2, the installation. This is what I understood. Middle Atlantic 2.
No. We reached Middle Atlantic.
No, I think I need to. Yeah.
Come closer so you can see it.
The most ancient level that we were able to reach is Middle Atlantic 2, but we know from Van Nefanter's work that the settlement started probably in early Bronze Age 3, 2-3, but early. At the bottom of the tale starts probably at on early Bronze Age 2-3 level, but Van Nefanter was stopped by the water table, so maybe there are more ancient levels below.
Yes, because I saw in the caption of a photo that you have some, I don't remember very well, one. You have Middle Atlantic 1-2/2. Then you mean that perhaps and even the jug that you showed to us, it is Middle Atlantic 2, but early, I think, very early. And it is not. Do you have radiocarbon datings? Not yet. And if you have an idea about, I am very interested in that. If you have some graves that you can even suppose that they can be used at the same time with the settlement. I mean, yes, you understand what I want.
Okay. As for the radiocarbon, we wanted to focus on excavation, and it's very we had to invest our money in working force, and we wait for the study seasons to invest in radiocarbon, but we will start this year. As for your second question about the contemporaneity between graves and settlement, it is clear that the last phase of the western sector is later. The tombs are later than the architecture. It is much less clear in the eastern sector between the small child burials and the remains of the Middle Atlantic 2 house that we have. And to go back to the western sector, concerning the phase D, that is to say the Middle Atlantic 1-2 settlement. We have 2 burials that are probably contemporary to the houses, and not they were probably not set after the abandonment of the houses. But it's very difficult to tell and to be precise on this point.
I found it very interesting with the 3 graves, one upon the other. And the bottom one, 3325, was a robust male, wasn't it? Sorry? Was it the bottom one? Yes. And can it be an initial grave, a central grave? The comparison I'm thinking about is at the Marathon tumulus, Vrana 1. There you have in the little center a male burial. Underneath and second, and in front you have these 2 vessels with 2 skiffos cut off, like to receive offerings. Do you have any vessels in connection with your burials?
Yes. This one was found connected to not to the robust adult male underneath, but this one was connected with the remains of the young female whose bones were disturbed, and it gives late Helladic I date.
I would like to answer Anna's question about the dating. This year we were very happy to find even Neolithic, late Neolithic sherds. Of course, the strata are not so deep, but this material was brought up on the surface through the graves, I guess. And we had a handful of Neolithic sherds and some early Helladic 2 and 3. So we go back. We don't know if we will be able to excavate these layers because we will reach the water at a certain point. But the material we have gathered shows the earliest layers, and it goes really very, very far back.
Thank you. Thank you for this wonderful presentation. I think it was a lot of work putting together. In the beginning of the discourse, I noticed something which has a little bit to do with the social context of this archaeological dig, that a lot of people had feelings in the area due to consecutive expropriations, and fear for their land and their belongings in the area. This is very, very common wherever we have not only just Middle and Late Helladic, but anything that is inhabited to our days. We have a difference here is that we're looking to exercise a right, which is the right to culture, and people also have the right to housing and properties in this area. So it is usually a very difficult moment to exercise parity with regard to how we deal with these situations. You spoke about working force. Are the local people integrated in the project? Are they making wages working at the dig, for example? Are they consulted with about the way they feel and they perceive these archaeological activities within the area that they live? Because it is a part of the community. And maybe also they can help you in some of the ethnographic perspectives of the region, because you are using archaeology, you are using anthropology, but there's an ethnography most probably of the region that could probably also help you look at and interpret what is going on.
This would be the subject for another conference, I think. But yeah, on the technical point you mentioned, this is an excavation made by students because we conceived it as a learning excavation as well. So there are Greek and French students and students from other European countries as well. This is really an international team with the most people coming from Greece and France, but we conceived it as a real synagogia from the beginning, with contributions from both lands and from other as well. So people from the village are not making wages directly from us. We live in the village, however, and we have had from the beginning many contacts to everyone in the village and in ITEA. We open the excavation for visits every year and comment it. And there are a lot of local cultural institutions to which we have contacts. So mainly through the Euphoria, of course, and this is a very important point for us because Kīrra is now subject to a new urban plan, which should encompass all the archaeological sites, and the exchange with the community are essential for us. Yes.
Concerning my work, I have to have relations with the people, particularly with the farmers, if I want to know things about the water, irrigation, agricultural practices. So it's true that if you go to this area, I am known as the French worker, okay? But this is real. I cannot do anything without the help of the farmers because they know the nature much better than I do. So yes, and also I cannot make drills in a private property, yes, if I don't have the authorization, of course.
I just wanted to ask about. I know that you said your work is just beginning the analysis of the course and so. But do you have any indications of any major phases, like for example, what happened at the time the site was abandoned? If it was abandoned in the Mycenaean at the end of or LH 3C, before 3C, or what? Yeah. Okay.
What happened at the end is not yet clear. We know that the settlement is interrupted, very probably at the end of Lateralic 3B or the beginning of 3C. But what we have is a little bit earlier, I think. So probably 3A or first half of 3B. And well, there are only hypotheses on that, on the very end of the settlement. We know that there is a big hiatus until the late 6th century, so until the sanctuary is built. We don't have any sherd, not the smallest sherd, which could be dated between the beginning of the 12th and the end of the 6th. What is clear is that we have to see that on a regional level, because you have the site of Gla and the site of Chryssa, which are contemporaneous with the last phases of Kīrra. And so it's not only that the settlement shifts on the Magula, building this kind of irregular hill, but it's going together with other settlement and the dynamics of other settlements.
And just one thing concerning not archaeological but environmental point of view, there is a thing in the plain that I still need to study in detail. Is that at the eastern part of the plain we have a source of salty water, very important source of salty water that pollutes all the south of the plain, because due to this salt you don't have trees, you don't have agriculture and all that stuff. So I would like to date the apparition of this salty source in the sediments in order to see if it can be connected with the last dates that they have, because this could be a reason, but this is just an hypothesis. The pollution of the soils in the area of the site of Kirrha due to the salt.
Well, thank you very much. I was very impressed by your drilling. I think it was a very nice drilling. It was beautiful. The drilling, where you got your palynological. I will have two questions. One is, you had some carbon-14 datings there. And what kind of material did you use for carbon-14 dating? The other is, you were talking about paleoclimatology. Did you find traces of climate changes?
So concerning the datings, we only dated vegetal remains, in situ vegetal remains. We had the opportunity to date the complete organic material inside the sediment, but usually as we are in a, let's say, carbonate environment, if we do that, it means that we can have older dates than the real dates of the vegetation that changed in this area. So we only dated the in situ vegetal remains on the radiocarbon dates. And we obtained the first logical chronology. I mean, we don't have inversion of dates, so we don't have problems concerning that. And the second question was if we found events. Yes. So first of all, this depression is connected with the actual sea level. I mean, here we are at 0 of altitude, so it is connected. It means that when you have the tide, this is not a very high tide in this area, but we have 50 centimeters. You can see that on inside the Dolin. So we need it to come during low tide times. So it is connected, and so in the core we have we have several sea levels. We have some, I did not notice it, but we have some shells, very small shells layers, so it is something completely connected. And we found in the date, particularly in this date, we have a very nice change between this brown, let's say very dark layer, and these very, let's say gray and white layers, dated to 5.4 kiloyears BP, which is a very well-known climatic event in Greece. So this is the first evidence that we have in the change of the sedimentation. And we have many changes between very dark and more clear changes. So it's sure that we will join the Greek, in some parts, the Greek profiles, the Greek paleoclimatology, but for this part, we are still expecting 4 other dates, so maybe in 1 month, we just sent the samples, and we are expecting climate events, particularly here. This one is already dated, and there is another one, but very recent, that could be related to the last little ice age, from the 18th and 17th century, that I would like to see, because it would be the first time that it would be the first record in Greece of this little climatic event. So this is very good. And also, to finish the speech, we will have the opportunity to have all the chronology of the Bronze Age with radiocarbon datings, because as you can see, the more recent date that we have here does not match with the occupation of Kίrρα, but we still have 2.5 meters to date, so we will be able to correlate these results with the excavations later.
It matches, in fact, but we do not have it archaeologically for the time being. So there is, we don't have the first phases of the settlement in the excavation, and we'll try to do that in the next years.
We are also planning, in order to reach the bottom of the tell, we are also planning to make a drill in detail, I mean from above, and to reach the deeply buried layers. So we are, as they did in Dikilitash in the north of Greece, in order to see if we can see in the stratigraphy of the cores some older remains that lie under the water table.
I have a last question, please. I'm getting the impression that people at Kirrha are very, very busy. They're very hardworking. A lot of them are dying, are re-dying maybe. And they're doing so much work. And where are the things these people are making at Kirrha?
Well, you may ask Georgia and Poppy for that. As I told you in the beginning, the study, like the C14, is we had to invest in the excavation. So for the moment, the study on lithic tools or pottery is not so advanced as what we can say on the excavation. So it will come.
Maybe we could give the microphone to Georgia, which I forgot to mention. She's responsible for the study of the lithic assemblage, and maybe you can have a little private conversation. Yes, we have lithic under study on the technological side and traceological side. We have we have many materials that are to be studied, but for now we concentrated on the excavation.
I'm sorry, but what you forgot to mention is that in the excavation of Kíra, there were 10 students of the University of Athens, and this work is done in the convention between the University of Athens and the French school. Thank you.
And I can see some of them.
Thank you again very, very much. And we can continue this very interesting discussion with some wine. But first, I would like to remind you all that on the 4th of June, Pempti, 4 Ιουνίου, we have the annual event of the Aegean Society at the Garden of the British School at Athens. And we would love to see you all there for some wine, for discussion, to hear a little bit about what Aegeus did this year. And also our traditional, by now, Λαχιοφόρο αγορά, raffle, I think it's called in English, for which we have tickets that you can already buy here tonight, just at €3, please, for each, and you have the chance to win fabulous gifts, the first of which is 4 nights at a luxurious hotel at Santorini. So let's enjoy the wine, and thank you again, Raphaël and Julien and Antoine.